I'm here with Punam Mathur. Welcome. Hi.
What a treat to be here. I mean, we've been talking about this for a minute,
Yes,
and so to be here is a gift.
I agree. I agree. I think I could just sit here and stare at you for like ever.
Yeah,
We could.
very uninteresting podcast. Thank you.
It would be. I know we have a lot of women in town who are really looking forward to this episode. We've been getting feedback that they've been so excited. Dana, shout out to Dana Bergren, who's the owner of the Coop here, where our office is, where we're filming this podcast. She said, "Is there an in studio audience?"
So I am grateful that there are women that apparently need to get out more. That's serving me well. Low threshold serves me well. Really kind.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this whole thing started, Poonam, by me having a conversation with Sonia Pekowick, who I adore, and we do work together. And we were talking about women that I would love to have on the podcast. She goes, "Oh, Poonam, I'd love to introduce you to Poonam." And at first I was like, "Gulp. That would be amazing. Thank you." And here you are. So for me, this is really a dream come true to have you sitting here on this
It's an
show.
honor. It is an honor. And thank you for the privilege.
Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of a straight shooter, like get to the point kind of person. So I'd love
Good.
to just lean
You
in.
straight shoot, Lisa. You
I'm
straight
gonna
shoot.
do it.
Definitely. How about
Okay.
that?
Okay. So we have a lot of listeners, thousands of listeners from all around the world who've been listening to this show from day one. And they get that the whole point of this show is to give real stories. For me, I started this show to do what I thought was missing in the finance industry, which is just share the stories of people. Because I truly believe that there's one person. And if there is only just one person today that needs to hear your story today, to know that they can do it, that they're possible, that is the purpose of this show. And so let's rock and roll. You ready?
Let's go.
Okay. You have a pretty impressive bio. And in the absence of sharing the bio, which I think humbly you kind of said last time was not as important, would you introduce yourself to the audience in your own words?
Wow. Hi, audience. Um, introduce yourself. Yeah, let me give you sort of the attributes that are the most informing in terms of who I am today. Oldest of three girls in a really tightly knit family, almost a decade span, youngest to oldest. Grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia. Really idyllic middle class upbringing. My father was a professor. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until the baby went off to school. So we had block parties. I had a lot of love and support. Never had a need that wasn't met. My whole life, I've been declaring I was going to be the world's best special ed teacher. And I had a powerful impact and influence by my godmother, who was at the provincial level, the head of all things special ed. So she poured a lot of love into my dreams. And then freshman year of university, and I went to the same campus. My father was a professor because that's what you do when you're the kid of a professor. 3 weeks in, he passed away. And so that didn't see that one coming. And so it caused me to drop out. 5-year program. Now I go back a year later and I'm a year behind. And kids in the world need me because I'm going to be the world's best special ed teacher. I've been declaring that since I was 8. I made a deal with the chair of the department to accelerate coursework, but I needed extrapolated credit for the practicums. Handshake deal. I kept my end of the bargain. 3 years later, I go back. I'm like, I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and said, I can't do that. And so in that moment, for me, retrospect, I was impetuous, yes, but it felt like injustice. It felt like something that was wrong that I need to make right. So I decided I need to teach him a lesson. And my lesson was I made a decision not to show up for finals. Take that. And then all of a sudden, I had pulled my own rug out from under my feet.
Mhm.
As the oldest, most likely to succeed, the one who declared the thing her whole life. Now what? And so I was born in this country and had an option, therefore, to run.
You were born in the United
I was
States?
born in the United States.
Okay.
And so I'd read something about Lake Tahoe because I kind of wanted to replicate the Pacific Ocean and the Rocky Mountain combo. It's kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
And so no show for finals in April. Packed everything up in the backseat of a Honda Civic, which doesn't have a backseat, and arrived by the end of April. It snows in May.
Yes,
And my very strategic thought, can I swear?
absolutely.
Just recounting
Yes.
the fact. My very strategic thought was, oh shit, I'm not far enough south. And that was the highly strategic plan that caused me
How
to
young
roll.
were you? You said 23?
I would have been 22, 23. I graduated school a year early. So I had So I was in my early 20s
Mhm.
and arrived into Las Vegas, the big city, totally ill prepared,
Mm.
completely broke, completely miserable, just too proud to call home and put my mother through it.
Mm.
And so I stuck it out. I mean, the first couple of years I lived here, I delivered the RJ, um, I mowed grass. And I think now, in retrospect, as I look back, it was a lesson for me, a really important lesson around excellence can define whatever it is you're doing. Even if the thing you're doing, isn't going to be for very long.
Mhm.
And so my little RJ customers never had to walk more than 5 steps to pick up their paper. And so at 2, 3 in the morning in that icky job, I could
Mhm.
at least go to sleep after it was done and say, I was excellent,
Yeah.
right? I could mow grass. I was excellent. So I ate hot ramen noodles and generic mac and cheese for a couple of years, and then got a job in a tour and travel agency, which caused me to then begin a business with a guy that I sort of befriended at the water cooler.
Okay.
Within a year of that business, I had bought him out. We had insane success.
What do you mean by travel agency? Like booking travel for
Yeah,
people?
back in the day, travel agents found Las Vegas a little icky to book because commissions, everything was cheap. Commissions, therefore 10% commission,
Okay.
really low. And so to get on the phone and call 6 hotels to get one reservation was not an efficient way for them to spend time.
Mhm.
So in one phone call, you call us toll free. We're going to book your room. We're going to book your shows. We're going to book your Grand
Oh,
Canyon
awesome.
tours. And so we had room blocks at the various hotels. They would pay us upfront in full 2 weeks prior to arrival. We'd pay the hotel.
Like a concierge
It was, yeah,
service.
many companies were doing it.
Okay.
And part of what was also happening is that many companies would get upside down and um, overspend
Mhm.
and have collected cash and then not been able to pay for the hotel rooms, right? So they would
Yeah.
fly away in the middle of the night. That actually happened to me because I got bored of the business. 17 employees. It was going great. It just didn't fill anything that felt like soul.
Mhm.
And so they looked at me because it was a family and they
And
said,
you were in your 20s.
I'm in my 20s.
You bought him out.
I bought my
You're
partner
running the
out. I've got my
company.
17 employees like my family,
Yeah.
all of whom were older than I was.
Okay.
And so at some point they said, you're really bored and a bit of a pain to have around. Go give back. Go do something with kids. Go do something in the community. We got this.
Mhm.
And they did. And I mean, part of it in retrospect is I wasn't grounded. And I already had a pretty loud imposter syndrome starting to shriek between my ears. And so that 1 year that I sort of walked away from the business and started getting involved in the community, before that person inviting me to join the board could change their mind, I would say yes.
Mm.
Not wise, just impetuous.
Mhm.
Within a year, I was on 16 different boards and committees.
Wow.
Yeah, it's possible too much of a good thing can be,
Yeah.
it's not good for you.
No, in your 20s, you can spread yourself pretty thin energetically and recover pretty quickly,
Yeah.
but spreading yourself thin, I went through that in my 20s too.
Yeah.
Can be a painful process.
So the business started to fail.
Okay.
Is what happened. And by the time I paid attention, actually faced it, my first inclination was I should go to Omaha because there's good stuff happening in Omaha. And then it occurred to me that would have been the second time in my very young life that my best solution was going to be to run.
Mhm.
Didn't want to get good at that. Plus, I'd fallen in love with the community through those involvements. And so I looked at the employees and said, I don't know, but let me go get clarity and come back because you deserve clarity. And I do
Mhm.
too. So I went to the ocean, which for me is the direct hookup to things bigger than I am. Um, and what became real clear is that I, for the first time, really examined my relationship to two words, success and failure.
Mhm.
And I came to realize that I had defined them as either or. And the clarity that 1 week on the ocean was life is short, man. It is short. And so if I'm living in a way that honors this gift that I've been given of life, it should look like me jamming 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing that, it should be sloppy. It should be messy. Failure should regularly, routinely define
Yes.
outcomes of actions. And the adjective that still belongs on my forehead is success, because that failure is part of living successfully.
Mhm.
So I came back and said, bad news and good news. Bad news is we're going down. Good news is we're going to fail more successfully than anyone's ever failed before. And we did. I mean, we sold everything, made whole the graphic designer who was working out of her den to take care of her autistic son, paid her every cent I owed her.
Mhm.
Stuck it to AT&T for tens of thousands of dollars, I knew they'd never miss it.
Yeah.
And so with the bow on the business, we walk into bankruptcy court, but then I needed a job.
Mhm.
And so then the next sort of really high impact experience was the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce was looking for a director of marketing. It was one of the organizations I had gotten pretty actively involved in.
Okay.
I had never taken a marketing class. I had only sort of mowed grass well and delivered RJ well and failed a business well. But the 6 people or 5 people on that search committee were people I served alongside
Mhm.
in those other volunteer roles. They gave me a shot. Out of 80
Mhm.
some applicants, I got that job. Ridiculous, right? That was an extraordinary run. I
Mhm.
had a leader who believed in me. The volunteers, the old white guys that ran the chamber back in the day, believed in me. They gave me opportunities. And so very quickly, promotion,
Mhm.
expansion. And so now, that takes us to my mid-30s.
Mhm.
The chamber was a fishbowl of a job. There was a weekly television show. I was doing radio daily. It was incredible.
And are you in the 90s yet? I mean,
I'm
you
in the
moved
90s. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm over 30. I'm now in my early
And
30s.
Vegas, I mean, I
It
was
was
born
the
and
go.
raised here. It was just whew.
It was the go-go time.
Mhm.
And so I was in morning, noon, and night. I'm at a podium. Applause is loud. The attention is fierce and delicious.
Mhm.
I still wasn't grounded. And I would go to sleep at night going, this isn't everyone looking from the outside. It looks so delicious, and yet there's some pain. Like, what is it? And I went through, am I being ungrateful? Oh, no, I was grateful. What was it? Well, what it was I was really far from who I was born to be. That is something with kids,
Mhm.
something to make life better in this world. Like that was what it was about. And so I did a mid-course evaluation at 36. I'm at the crest of the chamber gig. I reflected back on 18 and thought, what was it at 18 that what my life was going to be about? World peace mattered a lot. At 36, I'm like, okay, I'm going to contemporize that. I'm going to join my neighborhood watch.
'Kay.
And I did.
Can I ask a deeper level question?
Please.
With the running conversation, I know you said you lost your father young.
I did.
Did you reconcile that at that time when you say you were ungrounded? Did you actually grieve and come to terms with that, or was there a piece of that with being ungrounded?
Yeah, a lot of it. Yes, and I think the pain, it was an unwillingness to look in the mirror and explore within. And
Mm,
a big part of what was scary was the grief that I'd never really experienced or allowed myself to experience. So my operational um, practice was shove it.
yeah.
Can't let them see you. Can't be sad. Can't be. And I'd also been heavily rewarded and reinforced for always being on, for always having a good day, for always being the smiley one, for always solving the problem. And so between some of the external forces and my internal inability to and unwillingness, frankly, to open it up and deal with it kept me pretty ungrounded.
Mhm.
Right? And it kept me running pretty hard on the treadmill because as long as I was moving, I didn't have to deal.
Yeah,
And so I ran, and it served me well professionally. I mean, that not born out of a healthy place, but that fuel, that octane that was my propellant
sure.
served me well.
Mhm.
It got me a lot of opportunities, got me a lot of promotions. But at 36, it was a moment to say, I am going really hard in a direction that is not bringing me something that's really profound.
Mhm.
And I'd already pretty early on realized that life is short. And so what am I willing to put up with? Right.
Yeah.
Um, and so the kid thing was a non-negotiable, and I was doing nothing at 36 that was moving me. So I thought I don't need to. I want to reconstitute the fundamental construct of my life, and that meant
Yeah.
giving up that job. And so I did it without picking the next thing because I knew my old white guys that loved me so much would really not. They were going to have trouble
Yeah.
dealing with this as a personal thing. And if I came with, here's my next job, for them, it would be a negotiation. They'd have to take down the other guy. I didn't want that.
Mhm.
And so I gave him notice, took him 4 months to hear me. Um, and then one of the phone calls that came in that time was Elaine Wynn.
Mhm.
And she said, come and talk to Steve and I. And I'm like, I can make time for that.
I would too.
And I had a conversation with her in what I knew was the final step in a couple month long negotiation. I knew I was going to say yes. I would have followed them anywhere. But I practiced a soliloquy to clarify my value proposition and delivered it flawlessly, just like I practiced it in the mirror. And at the end of it, she looked at me and said, what'd you say? And I didn't see that coming. and I
No.
didn't have a plan B. And so I simply blurted out, I just need to be a mom. And the
Mm,
woman, Lisa, said 5 words that literally changed my life. Not a moment's hesitation. You just became more desirable.
mm,
The permission in that moment was profound. Um, I can remember every dimension of that moment. She has no recollection of the conversation at all. But I
wow.
went to work for her, and then she's a Jewish woman, so then she kept saying, "Where are the kids? Where are the kids?" And for me, it was always it wasn't a biological clock ticking. It was a desire, a yearning for children, for motherhood. And so I got licensed as a foster parent. Destiny introduced me to the babies. Two moved in 24 hours apart, a 9-year-old and a 2.5-week-old. A year later, my daughter moved in. 14 years later, another son moved in. And now we are a party of 5. And so I
Yes.
think those are uh, the most those are the moments, those are the experiences. This is a long introduce your answer to your simple question. But I think those are the things that have most imprinted me.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. 36.
That was 36.
36. That's when I had my awakening at 36 and bringing it all back to money. So I have different questions to layer this in for our listeners is from going from 18 and you leave well, you left home at 23, you left
That
BC
was 22.
22, got to Tahoe, kept driving essentially. It's too cold here. Got to Vegas. What part of town did you move into in Vegas? So in the 90s, I grew up across the street from the North Las Vegas airport off of Cheyenne and Rancho. So it looks totally different today than it did back then. Where did you live?
So
Where did you find yourself?
yeah, I was renting a little itty bitty studio place at the Cambridge Racket Club,
Okay.
center of town, right? And it was crazy. I mean, I grew up on the same block my whole life. So this transient nature, I didn't know drug scene. I didn't know after hours there was a huge
Mhm.
dark sort of thing at night here. Didn't know any of that. I didn't not know my neighbors. Like I didn't know how to live. And so it was a really big transition. It was years later that I finally sort of moved into suburbs and bought a home and then felt a part of.
Mhm.
Right. It was a rough few years. The first few years were rough.
Everyone that I know that has moved to Vegas has a similar experience if they don't already have family here. It's one of those cities it's a little hard to break into.
Mm.
If you've been here and you're connected, it goes a little bit easier, but yeah. So that's a very similar Vegas story. And did you know you were going to be here the rest of your life when you got here?
I haven't known. I don't know what 5 years from now is
Yeah.
going to hold. I mean, that's been every experience I've had tells me I don't know. And
Yeah.
so today I don't bother trying to predict
No,
or
no.
figure it out.
Sure. Most people are surprised when they end up here 20, 30
Yeah.
years. Yeah. But it's such a beautiful community. It really is. Going back to finances,
Mhm.
you were raised with an educated family. What were the conversations about money growing up?
Yeah. In retrospect, very few. Dad called all the shots. And it was interesting. There was some drama in my family when my mother went to work after the last of us were in school. She started volunteering. The volunteer
Mhm.
place said, keep doing it, we'll pay you. And so they had tension that I remember bearing witness to as she sort of found independence and voice
Mhm.
as a result of having her own money and her own job. And it caused some conflict.
Mhm.
We did not spend time getting taught up. We had a bank account.
Mhm.
We had bank accounts. My first job was at 13 because I was able to work in a car wash every Saturday. There I was. So I've always worked, always had that, but it wasn't. I mean, yeah, clearly we did. No one sat us down and said, "Here's your short-term stuff to think about, medium term, and then long term." None of that.
No,
None
no.
of that.
In to your comfort level, are you well, will you please share some of the lessons that you learned? So to go 23 then to owning a business. So for me, not knowing anything about money growing up, my dad was a stagehand. There were conversations about money, but same thing, never higher level conversations. I had to learn that when I became a financial
Yeah.
advisor and through my own hard knocks. How did you learn about managing your own personal finances to also managing a business financially? What were some
Well,
of those lessons?
remember I didn't manage it well because we went under. So I bankrupted the business. Um, yeah, the best teacher for me has been the mistakes I've made along the way.
Mhm.
And I look at my children now, three of whom are in their early 20s. And that decade, my goodness, for me, that decade was all around the really awesome mistakes I made. Um, and they teach you. I mean, they're the best teachers. And so
Mhm.
as a parent now, it's hard because I want to prevent the pain in my children. Yet I know that that would be a disservice to them.
Mhm.
And so relationship with credit. Oh Lordy, when those credit cards came, it didn't feel like money.
Yeah.
As the business took off, the credit cards came and they had lots of zeros and commas. And I was like, free money, not wise.
Mhm.
At some point, that bill comes due.
Sure.
And so then to crawl out of the debt that I had amassed was a painful and really rich experience. Never going to do that again. Right. And it really convinced me into a cash and carry, or certain debt is okay if it's foundational, the house, the car,
Yeah.
but debt for the food that is going to bring you zero benefit. I got that. And I got that early enough to then not be making those same mistakes
Yeah.
as I see others making them in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? The planning for the future, um, in my 20s, mortality was not a thing.
Mhm.
It just wasn't a thing. I think for me, the moment where that became an entirely different set of considerations was the moment that I met my first child. That it was in that instant that life after took on a completely different definition. And so life insurance and
Mhm.
really getting serious about that. I bought a policy in my 20s because a BFF had just gotten into the business, and so
Mhm.
I'm supporting a BFF. I didn't have the foggiest idea, and we probably did the transaction over wine
Yeah.
at Cafe Michelle's. And so I didn't know any of that. I got into that deeply with my kids
Yeah.
because they make the stakes entirely different.
Totally. Totally. Were you a single mom?
Yes,
Mhm. That's also another you wanna make sure that they're taken care of. There's no
exactly.
yeah, I get that. Okay, thank you for sharing that. If we could, almost look at life shifting at 36, if we were to use it as that context, from failure to success, what were those what was that 1 or 2 choices that you made that you look back on and go, "Wow, I'm really glad I did that." And from the place of our listeners who are in their 20s and 30s or even in their 40s and 50s are in the middle of making choices and they don't know how it's going to turn out. Do you have 1 or 2 of those in your mind where you're like, "That was the best thing I could have ever done?"
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I say this to my kids, get clear on your relationship to debt
Yeah.
because it can just build so quickly and be entirely overwhelming.
Mhm.
And so it is in your 20s, the urgency of now, right? I get that fancier car is the one you want now. I get that. But man, get the smaller one
Mhm.
because someday then you will get the biggest, baddest ass one
That's right.
ever. And then it will be a different relationship to that thing.
Mhm.
Right. And so I watch my kids as they really have to find a way to balance that, the urgency of now, that impatience of youth, which is a beautiful quality. So don't completely pull it up by a weed, but be careful of its impact on the decisions that you make.
Yeah.
It is important to have a buffer, right? I
Yes.
didn't have a buffer, and so a new carburetor would have tossed me over the
That's
edge,
right.
right? But you are worth more than having a new carburetor toss you over the edge.
That's right.
Um, and so that would be the one thing, is just really be clear about your relationship to debt, and you be the boss. Don't ever let debt be the boss of you.
I love that so much. I love that so much. There's so many toxic conversations in the money space. I think we're living in a very toxic financial world right now. I think it's going to shake out over time. And I love the way that you put that about your own relationship with debt, because what is important to you is not the same as others, but understanding its impact and where you're headed with it. Those are the conversations that we have in our world all the time. I'm not saying debt's bad. I'm just saying be
Yeah.
mindful of it, right? Be
You
mindful
be
of
the
it.
boss. It's when
That's right.
the locus of control shifts and it starts calling your shots.
Yes.
That is brutal.
It is brutal, and having been through Vegas in 2008, even 9/11 to a certain extent, our city shuts down, you know? We've lived through lots of shuts downs where it hasn't been our choice necessarily, and we've had to do some things about that, so that's where we wanna be mindful. I love that lesson, thank you. So wherever you are in the world today, maybe you're driving to work, Maybe you're in your kitchen prepping, I don't know, taking care of kids, getting some time for yourself, me time. However you're listening, whether you're live or on the podcast or watching us on YouTube, as always, I just want you to know how grateful I am that you've decided to spend your time with us. We don't get time back. And in my world, it's a wholehearted conversation about who we're investing our time with, how we're investing our time, and that all impacts our finances. It really does. And so in having this conversation with you, Poonam, there have been moments in your life where you've made very intentional decisions. It sounds like I would say intentional is a word from this whole story. Even when you were running, you were intentional about it from
In retrospect.
college.
Yeah, in retrospect.
And we were talking about the the shift over to working with Elaine and Steve Wynn, which was intentional, and there have been other intentional moments. What I would love to share with the listeners is to be able for them to bring it back to themselves. I want anyone listening, man or woman, to listen to the show and glean the advice or hear something that they need to know so that they can champion in their own life, that they can make intentional decisions because there's so many people that just don't feel like they're in control
Yeah.
of their finances, they're in control of where they work. And I know for me, when I left UNLV in 2011, it was a very intentional decision. There was some unconscious programming going on about my worthiness, like I'm in this position. I don't think I'm worthy of it. And I left, but it was still intentional to
Yeah.
stay home with my son. For you, you've made some intentional decisions wrapped around kids and your kids. So can you talk? Let's walk
Yeah.
through that what from meeting the wins and forward about the intentional choices that you've made.
So there's been a
It's a
couple.
loaded question, I know.
What's so this is going to be sound random and hopefully it'll make sense. So there's research that says 70% of your satisfaction in any job is a function of your relationship with your leader, your supervisor. So I would say to everybody, pick your boss carefully.
Mhm.
That has certainly been my experience. I am most turned on, most motivated when I'm connected to someone I believe in. For me anymore, it is about legacy leaders. My preference, strong preference, is to work for people who are right in their final chapter because they are seasoned, they are wise, there is no ulterior motive. They tell me the truth even when it really hurts, but they do it from a place of wanting me better. So I love that, right? So that's one thing that I've learned. Here's what I would say is I have had moments of clarity throughout my life, and I think we all have them, right? There's things that in that place in our body that has no words, that doesn't need to make sense, but we have those moments of clarity. And they may feel spiritual, they may feel emotional. I don't know what it feels like for you, but you've had them. I just never heeded them. I just never heeded them because I could outthink it. I could, oh, that's crazy. I could diminish it. I could minimize it. And I just didn't heed it. Over time, I have built through practice the ability to heed it. And here's what that has looked like for me. I'll give you a specific. So Stephen Lane sell the company that I'm working joyously for them 4 years after our forever life together. And I'm ready to jump ship because when there's a corporate takeover, I'd seen some movie that said you should blow up the ship and jump and it should be dramatic. So I'm ready to do it. And a mentor of mine said, hold on, Grasshopper. Why don't you first just spend a minute to get to know the acquiring CEO and then you can decide. I was like, ooh, that was bizarrely logical. And so I fell in complete respect with that acquiring guy and then grew to just adore him.
Mhm.
He was a legacy leader. I was honored and proud and privileged to be able to hook my wagon to his hiney. And during the 12, 13 years that we worked together, I got promoted to levels that were still to this day, I can't imagine and believe. I became an officer of the largest gaming company. Um, when he left, my legacy leader was gone. I had a moment of clarity. And
Mhm.
so in those moments of clarity, the real question is, what are you going to do about it?
Mhm.
Right? Will you talk yourself out of it? Doesn't change what is clear. Um, and so in that case, my moment of clarity was, oh my gosh, my legacy leader is leaving. The new leader who I knew and loved and adored to this day, I still do, wasn't a legacy leader. So I moved my wagon and hooked it to the hiney of another legacy leader. Turned out he did electrons. It was the statewide utility envy energy.
Yeah.
Um, but to be a part of that team met needs I already knew I had, right? And at that point in my life, I had subtle reminders that I could give myself that I was worth having my
Mhm.
needs met. 3 years into that awesome experience at Envy Energy, at my kitchen table, I've got three of my kids who are walking into puberty all at the same time. And so that really,
Lord have
Lord
mercy.
have mercy. Um, and so the clarity then was, oh, I want to be anchored at this kitchen table.
Mhm.
And so the law of physics say it is not simultaneously possible to then be anchored at the board of the conference table. So pick your table.
Yeah.
If and there were moments when I went to the pro and con list and that would shut me down because there was no legitimate, like with a biweekly good looking paycheck.
Yeah.
The alternative is to have no paycheck.
Mhm.
That's nuts. If I went there, I would never have done it. But in life, I think the one regret I never want is, and the bigger regrets for me are regrets of the things I didn't do, never the regret for the things I did do. Because no matter how bad a debacle I made of it, I learned a lot.
Mhm.
But man, if I never took the shot, ouch, right? And so I quit the corporate thing with all the security and had to manage the fear because I got this fear projector that just immediately casts these huge
Oh, of course.
boogeymen of fear. And so at that phase of my life, I actually had to deal with it and say, how am I going to manage and temper the fear?
Mhm.
So the one antidote that has now worked really well for me is I can look in the rearview mirror, which is the only incontrovertible evidence that I truly have because it's my experience. And so when the fear said, oh, Lordy, if you quit your job, you will be homeless.
Yeah.
I could look in the mirror and say, how many times in my life have I actually been totally incapable of putting a roof over my head? The answer is never. So unplug that. It
Mhm.
just diminished that fear, right? How many times I've been incapable of feeding my family? Never. I can mow grass. I can deliver the RJ.
That's right.
I can get it done. And so that has made possible, it's the management of fear. It's the knowing in that inexplicable source where clarity is pristine. I've heeded it. And what I notice is that's the single hardest thing for most of us to do.
It is.
And so heed it is what I would say. It ain't
Mhm.
going to be easy. It's going to take some work. You're going to have to manage the fear, deal with the practical realities. But there's nothing you can't do. You got a 100% track record. And I'm not offering an opinion. I'm looking at your rearview mirror to see your extraordinary 100% track record in overcoming and succeeding through whatever it is you've been through.
That's right.
The end,
That's right.
right? And so today, that sort of perspective is a profoundly liberating one for me.
It is.
Fear does not call my shots anymore.
I love that so much. There's so many women that come into our world, and we work with men and women. I'm on a mission for women to become the financial leaders of their lives because I believe that the world's going to be a better place when that happens. And for women, I've asked that question because the fear takes over. And for some women, they do raise their hand and they say, I have been homeless. And then it's like, look at you now, though,
That's right.
right? That doesn't mean that you will be again. And other women who have gone through a bankruptcy, that doesn't mean that that will happen again. And when we fearscape, Tim Ferriss calls it fearscaping, where we go back and we just go through that wormhole of what if and then look back, that it can be immensely valuable to say
Yeah.
yes, and here I am. And yes, and I'm going to leave this amazing company because my kids are worthy of it, right?
It also, for me, Lisa, in my 20s and 30s, I realized now in retrospect, I didn't realize it then, that the gauges that I had on my dashboard of success were gauges that were given to me by other people.
Mm,
I didn't pick them. And so, spiffiness of car, I am not a car person. I've never been a car person, but that was a gauge
yep.
to how it looked on the outside. I don't know that that's inherently who I am. It was absolutely who I became
Mhm.
because that was a gauge given to me. And so, in my limited gauges of success, mostly defined by other people, um, what I realized is when heeding but wait, you're a mom first, and you don't get the best 2 out of 3 in this thing called life. And this is a regret I choose not to have. Part of what happened in that transition was the discovery of the gauges that were actually more meaningful to me,
Yes.
right? So today there's a gauge, I call it my intimacy gauge, which is going to sound creepy to some of you, so stop it. But let me define intimacy as into me you see. I spent
Mhm.
so many years just running full speed on a treadmill. And when you do that, everything else is a blur. Today, I can stop and have moments of into me you see.
Mhm.
And we know it. I can feel it like right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Do you wanna hold hands?
that today is a gauge on my success metric,
Yeah.
right? I didn't have it before. And so the way that I defined what wealth was, the way that I defined what money was going to be in my life was a really, for me in retrospect, pretty superficial
Mhm.
set of gauges that were given to me by other people. In my 50s, and now I'm 62, beginning in the 50s were really the decade in which I got really clear about what my gauges needed to be,
Mhm.
and I could create my own dashboard,
Yeah.
right? And that's been really awesome.
That's freedom.
It's freedom. That's what it feels like.
That's the freedom. My 40s got really cool because of that. To say, success is gonna look different for me than it does for other people, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And that wasn't always the case. And that takes you knowing yourself and feeling confident enough to say, the people that are in my life love me for me. I don't, for me, these were my lessons. So if you could share some of yours too. But what I learned is that I only need a few good friends. And if I have a few good friends, like my 3 a.m. friends, like Ashley and Gail and a few others, and my husband, life
That's
is
rich.
great.
That's rich.
Life is great.
That is rich.
And
Yeah.
I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. And if they want to still hang out with me, I'm winning.
Okay.
I'm winning. So that, oh gosh, I spent years running too. For you, what are those moments now where you're like, yes, I'm on track? And do you know, or do you ever get off track anymore? Do you
Sure.
know
Yeah.
like those?
In any day. I mean, yeah, my intention every morning is 100% or a 10.
Mhm.
And on a good day, I'm hitting sixes and sevens. That's a good day. If I hit a 2, I owe someone an apology, sort of how I look at
Yeah.
it. But that's sort of life. Um, for me, none of the strands on my loom of life have changed. I've got professional commitments. I've got personal commitments. There's always something broken in my house that needs to get fixed. There's self care, my friendships. I'm a sister, a daughter. There's all of those responsibility strands. There's still responsibility strands. The difference in this chapter of my life is there's an openness, not constriction in the weave. So I love that I don't set an alarm clock.
Mhm.
For years, that alarm clock spit me into ready or not.
Yeah.
Today, I wake up, and if it's dark, I look at the clock and decide if 4:30 is too early or 5.
Mm.
But then I can sort of do a self check on my body to say, "Yo, body, what do you think? Are we ready?" And if we're not, we'll roll over. And if we are, we'll get up.
Mhm.
What a gift! I had no idea until I had the experience how luxurious that was going to be.
Mm.
That's one,
Mhm.
right? I love that I'm based out of my home. And I mean, I gotta tell you, the first few months that I was based out of my home, I was that little squirrel chasing every shiny marble. It was ridiculous. I was so unproductive because every drawer I'd open, I'd be like, "Oh, I should tidy up the
Yeah.
drawer," and then I'm gonna just nuts. Now I've sort of developed the discipline to be able to work at home
Mhm.
and be able to live and relax at home and be able to do both in the course of a day. So the what are the riches today? There are some days where I can be really productive and do some Zoom and do some email and then do a little Netflix and chill in the middle of the
Love
afternoon.
that.
I love that I can go for a walk and it doesn't have to be at 5:30 in the morning or on a treadmill.
Mhm.
When the weather's as gorgeous as it is right now, I can go at any time and enjoy it. Right?
Yeah.
Those are the riches. It's the flexibility and the freedom to do it on my own terms rather than based on permissions granted by others who are calling
Agreed.
my shots.
Yeah. Coming from corporate America, that's a big deal. I you're I've always looked up to you. I mean, I was in my 20s when I first saw you on a stage. And I was like, "Wow, she's got it together."
But maybe during my ungrounded phase.
Yeah.
So you can play it off, right?
See?
I played it off for a long
You
time.
got it. Yeah. And hearing you speak into what freedom really means to you today is so powerful because those are the same things that the women and men in our world come to us in their 20s and 30s who say that's what they want. We have one client in particular. She's a dancer on the strip and she was in tears saying, "I just want to be able to sleep in
Yeah.
one day."
So I would say, I'm going to tell you about my son. So Richard is my 33-year-old, and he would be so uncomfortable if he knew I was talking about him on radio. Suck it up, son. I met him when he was 9, out of the foster system. This human has endured more trauma than any human ever should.
Mhm.
That's my son. Comes out of a deep gene pool of addiction, which kind of creates a very high predisposition for a similar journey. And he went through all of that for most of his 20s. It was excruciating to witness. It was painful. And when he was done, I had said to him, "There's nothing I'll do to support your addiction because it won't then need my help to take you out. It will kill you. But if you've exhausted every idea of how you're going to lick it on your own and you're ready to get help, there's nothing I won't do to help you." So he finally sought residential treatment, sober living.
Mhm.
He is now, I think, almost 5 years, probably clean and sober. Here's what he has taught me: is he is so clear about what he wants and what his needs are. More than anything, he wants stability. More than anything, he craves consistency. He's not a guy that likes surprises. His life has had way too many surprises. The security of knowing what is true today will be true tomorrow is the one thing that's eluded him for so much of his life. That's what he wants. This boy, this man, extraordinary man, give me 4 pairs of jeans and maybe a pair of the khaki ones.
Mhm.
I don't need more than 2 pairs of sneakers. Give me a pair of work boots. And I got 1 pair of dress shoes because my mom occasionally makes me go to events with her.
Mhm.
1 suit's all I need. Give me my PlayStation, my dog, and a couple of the friends that I cherish. And that's all I want.
Mhm.
Um, he loves his 401k, is really conscientious because that's his way of ensuring the continuity and consistency. He has never been motivated by how it looks on the outside.
Mhm.
He's only been motivated by how it feels on the inside. I have so much respect for him because that's exactly the opposite of what I spent the majority of my life doing. It took me a long time
Yeah.
to say out loud and be clear and unapologetic about what my needs were. My son is unapologetic about what his needs are. It's a beautiful thing. So it ain't about how it looks. It doesn't matter if it's shiny or new or blingy. Get clear about what your needs are, because whatever they are, you're worth that.
Mhm.
And if it involves shiny and blingy, I say good for you. You're worth it. Go get it.
Right.
And if it doesn't, don't apologize for that. He is not a raw ambition kind of guy. He never apologizes for that.
That's so amazing.
He's a homeowner. He watches his credit score. Because when he finally emerged on the other side of addiction, no development happens while you're in active addiction. So when he comes out, he's like, questions like, what's a credit score?
Yes.
Once he learned it, he's brilliant. So he learned it and then got really focused on building it, was checking his app more than any other app, probably. Boy, built it up.
Mhm.
And then it was a conversation about worthiness. You, my boy, are worthy. You've earned it, man.
Yes.
You deserve that. Like, you're allowed to do that. And that's been the joy, right? He is probably above most people, maybe except for Elaine Wynn. It's been another, like, she's a gazillionaire. And it's a lot to own a private jet. And you got
It is a
hangars.
lot to manage.
It's a lot to manage. And so
Mhm.
when she, complains, as she does occasionally, about the stuff that she's got to deal with, she will always consistently punctuate with, "Man, what rich people problems I have."
Yeah.
True that, but she's unapologetic about owning that it's still pressure on her,
Of
right?
course.
And so I think it's about, when it comes to, for me, my relationship with money has been symptomatic of my relationship with myself.
Mhm.
And so,
It always is, just so you know.
yeah,
It
yeah.
always is.
And so, note to us as
Yes.
humans, don't focus on the money. Focus on the conversations in the mirror, right? Focus on embracing and claiming that brilliance. Define relationships, your own, with fear, success, failure, expectations of others. There are things that trigger me based on pain I have experienced.
Yeah.
Being aware of those triggers and to what extent that pain affects me is an important thing for me to be aware of, so that it doesn't become a default thing. It can still be an informed decision.
Yes.
So be true, because that's my experience with money, is that the weller I got, the more comfortable I became at claiming me, the easier everything got.
Mhm. I love that. The more you claimed yourself,
Yeah.
the easier things got. Amazing. So we've got 4 minutes to go. I'd love to have you back sometime.
Anytime.
These are great conversations. I've loved listening
They're
to your
very
story.
conversations that we just don't have very often, which is nuts, right? We should be having this all the time.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I do it every week, 10 a.m. all the time. I know when we had talked about the show, when I invited you to join the show, you had said that on Saturdays you meet with friends. And I'd like to close out this conversation with hearing from you the people that were your team. So, in addition to corporate leadership and tagging on to people who really could help you forge your path financially, who have been the people that have helped you elevate? Because as we elevate in life, so
Yeah.
we elevate financially. Who's on your team?
So my sisters are my on anything, right? And so we have all of us being less than super grooved with advanced degrees in money management.
Mhm.
You know, one sister is a professor. She and her husband both professors at UCLA, so they have a lovely life with assets, and so we have sort of grown together. The baby sister, she and her husband run a bed and breakfast in Rio and are very successful. And so we talk a lot because it's the safest
Yeah.
relationships, and they can see me dirty diaper. They love me, dirty diapers and all. um, the tying back to I don't have people that I turn to as fiscal mentors.
Mhm.
I have people who I rely on heavily as emotional mentors.
Mhm.
And so as emotional mentors, often the way in which the emotional pain seeps is I'm being impetuous or I'm denying myself. So that is this group of sisters, my sister friend, sister wives. I don't know what they are. We call them our tribe.
Yeah.
But we are a half a dozen women who Zoom every Saturday morning for an hour, 90 minutes from states all over the country. And it's safe space. We have just sort of all pinky promised that this is one place where no truth will ever be judged. No tears will ever be made fun of.
Mhm.
And it's a place to bring the joy and the stuff that is the good for me. I want to wag my tail, but it's creepy for me to say it out loud.
Yeah.
Like you need, and I've got
You need
sisters,
that.
but then I've got these other sisters, so I can celebrate the joys. I can celebrate the good for me's. I can celebrate the oh shits and the
Mhm.
oh mans and the I am beating myself up over this, or this is stuck in my craw and I'm ruminating. It's that safe space.
Yeah.
And so we walk in literally every Saturday. We quickly do a quick round of gratitude. And then it's whoever wants to share whatever's on their heart. And it's a beautiful thing. And inevitably, every Saturday, I'm going to hear something I didn't even know I needed to hear. But when we're open and seated in a place like that, there's nothing but nourishment.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get nourished even when I don't feel like I'm hungry.
I love that.
And it's a cool thing. So
That's amazing.
that's really the tribe.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I agree. I think having emotional support, even if you don't have financial mentors per se, goes a lot deeper because you get to see what you really need to see and hear what you really need to hear. And then the finances wraps around that.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. One final thought. What's on your heart to share with the audience today?
So I think this morning there are 8 billion people on the planet. There's only one of you. So whatever thoughts come in today about how you're not enough of this or not enough of that, stop it. Because all of that becomes a scrim that prevents your light from being expressed in the world. And there's 8 billion of us. And we need your light. The world needs your light. Um, to grant yourself permission,
Thank you.
own it,
Own it. Thank you
claim
for
it.
being a light in our city. Thank you for being light in my world and for so many women and men in Las Vegas and beyond. You are amazing. Thank you for being on the show today.
It's so
Oh,
much fun. Thank you.
thank you. For everyone joining us, wherever you're joining us, however you're joining us, thank you for sharing your time with us today with Punam Mathur, Lisa Chastain. We will catch you next week with a brand new guest right here on Real Money. See you next time.